Hi, KU Faculty Evaluation Committee. My name is Elizabeth Sullivan, and I am a master's candidate of the Curriculum Instruction Program with a focus on literacy. I have been teaching for 6 years. This will be my 7th year coming up. I've been working in middle schools, mostly in New Orleans, Louisiana, but 1 year ago I moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, so that's where I live now and will be teaching. The schools I have worked in have all been charter schools and inner city urban communities. My students have majority been African American and Hispanic. They come from often high poverty situations and are typically several grade levels behind when I receive them. So a lot of my motivation for attending KU's program is thinking about my students and how I can use best practices, strategies, understand the curriculum better to better address their unique needs. As a teacher of older kids, I'm expected to teach a certain level of text and literature that uses advanced concepts and language. A lot of it is antiquated. And in my first few years of teaching, I really saw this struggle of my students to understand the literature that we were learning, that we were supposed to be teaching them, and they just weren't connecting, they weren't learning it, and they weren't growing as readers. So that really motivated me to find a program like KU's and delve into it to become a better teacher. So the learning outcome I decided to focus on today is learning outcome 2. Identities, communities, and inclusive learning contexts. The reason why I chose this is because I am a Caucasian teacher who, up until recently, was from the North, teaching in the South, and teaching within a community that was much different from where I was raised, and I really wanted to address that in a way that truly benefited my practice and therefore benefited my students. My favorite courses I took throughout my master's program were CNT 745, which my artifact is from, and also CNT 807, Multicultural Education. The reason why I really like these courses is because the reading, the discussions, it really opened my eyes and it really helped me to think about my students in a new way and think about myself in a different way as well. So the artifact I chose to talk about is our research question PowerPoint that we created for this course, 745, Reading in the English Language Learner. And the reason why I chose this artifact for learning outcome 2 is because everything I'm going to talk about in this PowerPoint for the original assignment was reflective of an English language learner. However, because the majority of my students are so very far behind, these strategies really work for a striving reader just as well. So these strategies have really helped me break down those upper level novels and get them onto a level where my students can grapple with the text, understand what's going on, and really be involved with the literature. So these strategies have really worked for me, and I still continue to use them with my striving readers and ELL students. So again, the research question I posed for this assignment was, what are 3 strategies to break down a middle high school level text to an ELL? The first thing I thought about when choosing this question was, how do I bridge this gap between what we are supposed to be teaching our kids and what they can understand independently on their own? I was witnessing this gap in my classes, and as a teacher, it was really hard to navigate that. So the research that I completed to produce the final product, which I'm talking about now, really helped me get some tried and true strategies in my classroom that help create that gap in between what they can do and how the book is written. So And I love that this was talked about so much in both CNT 807 Multicultural Education and also CNT 745, the English language reading in the English language learner. The most important thing I can do before jumping into a really upper level text is getting to know my students. It's so very important to really understand where they are on an individual level. Getting to know what they like, what they don't like, what they're interested in, what they do after school, along with analyzing for each kid their intellectual deficits that are going to be barriers in your novel unit and that you need to anticipate before starting the unit and plan ways to address them to get them involved in the text. So my first strategy I came up with was are we going to build a bridge out of steel or straw, understanding BICS versus CALPS. BICS stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, and CALP is a Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency. So BICS really describes your basic social interaction that you're having with kids and with kids are having with other kids. So this is completely oral. So this is informal conversation, what they're saying to each other, basic writing that they're doing. So this is something that I didn't think about before doing this research, and it's so important for teachers to think about, is our instruction on the BICS level or is it on the CALP level? Is it formal? Is it that abstract language? Is it the tier 2 and 3 words? Is it complex? And are you explicitly teaching these things? BICS, a kid is going to absorb through interacting in the world, but the CALPS is the language that you're going to have to explicitly instruct through, vocabulary instruction, what you're saying, the visuals in your classroom, etc. So again, looking at the iceberg analogy, you really have to look underneath the surface of the water of the kid and figure out what they already know as far as their CALPS language and knowledge, and then what you need to do to enrich that. So BICS is the tip of the iceberg, and CALPS is all of that, what they know and what they don't know underneath, that you have to do work as a teacher to figure out and address. So how I incorporated CALPS into my instruction is I really started thinking with ELLs and with striving learners, how do I make it more, content and context embedded? And that means using a ton of visuals. I use a ton of video. I use a ton of hands-on learning and demonstrations. Anything that's going to be engaging them auditorily, visually, and hopefully with movement as well, so they're really involved and engaged with the lesson and they're more likely to learn the new language or skill. So for example, in a novel unit such as To Kill a Mockingbird, which I've taught before, I had a breakthrough with my striving readers and my ELLs who weren't understanding what was going on in this book. They were getting lost in the complicated language. Instead, we would do a technique where we would read a section of the novel and then immediately after watch a clip of the movie, the original movie that very closely follows the book, and then rereading that section again. So that way they had exposure to the text, then they had a visual in their mind of what is happening in the scene, what are the characters looking like when they're saying this dialogue, what is the setting actually like, what is the mood of this book, of this story, and then reading it again with that context in their mind, which really helped engage them into the story and understand it way better. The next thing I'm going to talk about with the strategy I use in my classroom is building prior knowledge. And the most important breakthrough I had throughout my master's course and doing this project also is I can't assume anything about my students. A pitfall I had in my first few years of teaching was these are middle schoolers. They should know how to read this, or they'll definitely know how to punctuate, or they'll definitely know how to write a three-paragraph essay. But some of them don't. So really looking at myself and my own biases and getting those out of my own way so I can start with a blank slate and getting to know what my students, what skills they have and what skills they're lacking. And again, planning for that and doing a ton of explicit instruction that includes those visuals, those hands-on, to build up that prior knowledge. Again, with To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm not going to assume that they understand segregation, that they understand courtroom proceedings. So again, doing those CALP activities and explicit instruction on that higher level using the language in the book so they can see and hear it and then have that prior knowledge built up, jump into the text. And my third strategy quickly is just being really strategic about grouping. Again, this can be used with everyone in your class, not only ELLs, not only striving readers. I quickly want to go through that there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages of all strategies of grouping. And what I've learned is that it's about thinking about your students and the activity or lesson that you have in mind and finding the strategy that really fits their needs and the needs of the activity and really like utilizing that in every single lesson. So again, the different grouping strategies. Here are my strategies and my references. To create this project, we did 20 hours of independent logged research. I also interviewed the head of my ELL department at the school and an ELL teacher and really got some good feedback from them of on the ground, like how do I incorporate these research into kind of ready to plug in strategies that teachers can use. So that's a quick synopsis of this artifact and this rationale of kind of how it fits into the second learning outcome. And I just want to say that through this master's program, I've really had to take a hard look at myself and who I am as a teacher and how I teach. And it's really helped me to grow so much, learning more about different theories, how to make my classroom more Montessori has been a huge influence on me, how I can let go of biases I have about my students, recognizing that I do have biases and getting those out of my own way to really be the best teacher that I can. Waking Up White was a really impactful book for me. I mean, I really related to that, and I feel like the narrator talking about her experiences of realizing it's not enough to just have good intentions and have a good heart as a teacher. You really have to understand the context of which your students are coming in to school and what the experience of school was like for their parents and their parents when you're working with communities of color and communities that have kids living in poverty, etc. So that was a huge moment for me. As I wrap up my master's, my final thought would be I'm never going to stop being both a teacher and a student. Teaching is such an art, and there's no end to the improvement that I can do to be a better teacher, to be more impactful, to be more creative, and of finding ways to really impart knowledge and skills onto my students. So I'm very excited to be completing my master's and to be walking in August into my 7th year of teaching English and really trying to drive that passion of literacy back into my students. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.